It's Branson here. Today we're recreating a scene from the novel The Outsiders, and we're doing it in Minecraft.
What could a Soch say to a greaser? What was that?
Now let's see the behind the scenes. Make sure you stick around to see what happens at the end of the video and to see how this really came along. During around the start of the making of this recreation, I started working on the parking lot, which was an important part of the Rumble, which was also a part of the book. In the Rumble, it's where the Greases and the Soches fight. And they basically are just a bunch of gangsters that don't get along very well. Over here, I'm making my first house, while JT, my friend, is working on a couple other houses meanwhile. As you can see here, I had to perfect the pathway leading to the doors of the house, and I tried to add as much texture as I could add. So right now, I'm going to start working onto the stone structure of the house, which actually turned out really well and better than I thought it would. Then I'm adding spruce logs just to make it look a little bit more better. So now I'm making the windows of the house and then onto the roof. Over here I'm using dark oak to make the roof darker than all the other wooden textures there. And I also realized that maybe near the garage I accidentally made it to be made out of spruce and not dark oak. So I later fixed that to design. As you can see over here, I started building using spruce, which I realized I'm supposed to use dark oak. The texture pack that I use for this is called Actions and Stuff, and it adds animations and just a texture pack to make textures just look better. So here I'm making my first shot where he says what's going on, and then he finds Randy in the car. This is an important scene in the book because in the book it shows how Randy, the toughest of the Soches, doesn't even want to go into the Rumble and fight because he knows he might get hurt. And so here I added a few trees just for more texture to hide some of the making, so that I didn't have to make a lot of houses. So I'm adding boards to make it look like the house is broken down. And just another house just to add a bit more structure to the whole recreation. Over here I add a bit of textures. Make sure that the roof looks good. Not anything fancy, but just like working on the roof. Okay, here I wanted to add a fence, and then I ended up putting black concrete behind it so that it looks a little bit better, and so that you can't see behind it, because behind it it's just grass. After this part, here's where I finish that. And then this is when I'm working on to the car and setting up a few more shots. As you can see here, I'm adding the dummies just because I didn't have another person to help me out. If I did, then I could just use that person. Here JT hides behind the tree and then kinda scares me in the game because I didn't know where he was. Here I'm changing my skin to Dally, and then JT doesn't want to use that exact skin, so he wants to create his own skin right there. There I use Steve because Ponyboy has a Steve texture pack. And then here it looks like Steve is like listening to what he's saying. Here I just changed my mode just because I need to go back into creative mode because I was in spectator mode to look at the shots better. Okay, now that's where I put my setup, the greasers versus the Soches. And then if you read the book, you find out that the greasers won it in the Rumble. But then some of the characters were hurt real badly. Then I add a few trash cans just to add more detail. And then over there, you can see the zombies there. I made them to have a player head so that it looks a little bit more like the greasers rather than just zombies. And copper armor, which represents the jackets, the leather jackets that the greasers wore. Here I add a few flies with the realism VFX add-on, just to add more detail to the background. And then I have to change it to nighttime, and then make it to rain so that it creates a good setting for the Rumble. Here, that's the Ponyboy skin, but he ended up also going as the dairy skin. With the actions and stuff texture pack, when it rains, it actually shows the raindrops onto the ground, which is a really cool effect. Here, this is where they're circling around each other, and then seeing who's gonna throw the first punch, which I found was a pretty cool shot. And here I'm just changing the game mode, making it that my hand doesn't show, just for a better effect. And then here, I have to make my hand show back. had to change it back to midnight because we were already taking so long for it. Then here I have to add the zombies, which represent the greasers, and the villagers to represent the Socs. And then here's just the making of the blue Mustang found in the book, which was in the making of this. JT had to fix it up a little bit. Here's where I added all the zombies and then make them basically to all kill the villagers to represent like the greasers winning in the rumble. There, JT helps a little bit with getting rid of the villagers. Just punching them for some reason. And then after this, I twirl around and then show the whole set that I made. Add in a few other things that I can. And just we have to kill off the rest of the zombies and then show JT running away, representing the Socs backing off from the fight. Here I realize that without showing your hand, it's kind of hard to tell if you have a weapon with you or not. Here it looks like I'm just doing nothing, but right now I actually have a sword in my hand, which it doesn't show due to me turning on the offhand, not showing this setting. You know, here I'm telling JT to run that way, and then I have to see him run. Now here's what I made.
What was that? Randy? Are you here to jump me again?
No. It's something else.
What could a Soc say to a greaser?
I can't join the rumble, pony boy.
But you are a Soc. I thought you don't have any feelings.
Nothing good comes out of a rumble anyways. So I'm going to back out. And I think you should too, pony boy.
I really can't let the greasers down, though. I thought you were in the hospital, though.
Yeah, I was. I ain't now.
Get thee hence, white trash. I'll take on anyone. Look, Dally. Hold up. Ow. Look at them run.